He saw her from the porch, standing in the pond like she belonged there. Dust barely lit her face, but the shoes caught it. Pale green, buckled, the kind with one scuff on the toe, one rip at the seam. His daughter's shoes. He didn't speak at first. Just stepped off the porch, boots quiet on the dirt, fists already curling. The girl didn't move. He reached the bank, stopped cold. She was knee-deep, not shivering, just still. You have about 10 seconds to tell me who you are. She looked up slowly, hair dark with pond water, eyes steady. He pointed. Those ain't yours. She tilted her head. Take 'em off. She didn't. I said take it. Them. Off. She didn't blink. They were a gift. The words landed wrong, sharp and soft at once. He stepped closer, breath hard now. Who gave you those shoes? She looked down at them, wiggled her toes. He shouted, Answer me. The girl's voice barely rose. She did. He stopped, cold, throat closing. What? She said I'd need 'em. His stomach turned. Who? She looked past him. Your girl. Silence stretched like the pond behind her. He stared, jaw locked, vision starting to haze. That ain't funny. She wasn't laughing. He stepped into the water. I didn't feel the cold. Just grabbed her arm. Where'd you get those damn shoes? She didn't pull away. I told you. He yanked her toward shore. She came easy, no struggle. Water ran down her legs. Dress soaked, thin, blue like his daughter's old Sunday one. Who are you? I'm just here. Where's your mama? She's not here. He scanned the tree line. Empty. Fields beyond it. No wagon. No man. No footprints. Where'd you come from? She shrugged. I walked. From where? She didn't answer. He looked down again. At the shoes. The tiny scuff he remembered polishing out with his thumb. The rip she cried over when the wire fence caught it. He'd sewn it up himself. They were the same shoes. You steal 'em off a grave? No. You dig her up? No. He gritted his teeth, pulled her harder. She stumbled on the bank, but didn't cry, didn't flinch. He dragged her toward the barn. You're going to sit there till I figure out what this is. I know what it is. He stopped again, turned. What's that? She gave them to me. She's dead. She knows. His grip loosened. She said it'd hurt more this time. What? She said you'd remember. He let go. She walked ahead of him now, past the tool shed, past the widow's empty garden beds, toward the barn with its half-hinged door. He watched her open it without asking. She sat on the hay without protest, pulled her knees in. Shoes still on. He slammed the door shut, dropped the bar. He leaned against the wall outside, breathing hard. Eyes shut. Inside, he could hear her humming. Not a tune he knew at first. Then he did. The same one his daughter sang at bedtime. He stumbled away from the barn, toward the house, toward the dark kitchen where the widow wouldn't be. She was gone for 2 days, visiting her sister or the preacher's wife. He forgot which, but the fire hadn't been lit since. He didn't mind the cold. He poured a glass. Whiskey, shaking hands. Sat at the table. Stared at nothing. Shoes. That tune. That voice. He took a drink. Midnight. The house creaked. He didn't sleep. He lit a lamp and stepped back outside. The barn was silent now. No humming. He unbarred the door slowly. I opened it. She was sitting in the same place. Awake. Are you still here? She nodded. You sleep? No. You always talk like that. She shrugged. He stepped inside. Sat across from her, in the feed box. Why were you really here? I was told to come. By who? She didn't have a name anymore. You mean my daughter? She nodded. You're lying. She didn't respond. He rubbed his eyes. She's dead. Been a year. She knows. He stared at her. The shoes. The way they still looked clean, even after the pond, even after the dirt. You ain't scared? No. Why not? She told me you wouldn't hurt me. His voice cracked. She was wrong. No, the girl said. She wasn't. He stood. You got a place to go? She didn't answer. He looked away, then back. Are you hungry? She nodded once. He stepped out. She watched him from the doorway. No fear, no doubt. He walked to the house, fixed a plate, cold bread, old beans. When he came back, she was still humming. He handed her the plate. She ate slowly, grateful but quiet. He leaned on the doorframe, arms crossed. Where are you from? I don't know. Do you remember anything? She said, I'd remember when it was time. He sighed. Is this a game? No. She told you what to do? She said I'd find you, that you'd listen. He stepped forward. Why me? She said you broke it. Broke what? The promise. He stepped back. You're out of your mind. She looked up. Am I? He left again. Didn't lock the door this time. Just sat on the porch. Drank again. The pond glowed faint under moonlight. The shoes had no mud, no scuff, not even a splash mark. He didn't call the sheriff. Didn't tell the widow. Just watched the barn until sunrise. And still, that soft humming never stopped. She didn't try to run. Just curled up in the hay with her hands folded neat, like she'd been locked in barns before. He slid the wood beam back across the door, stood still for a second. No sound, no crying, no footsteps. He walked back to the house slowly. Wind cut across the field, but he didn't feel it. Just heard her humming again, that same tune. He poured another glass. I didn't drink it, just stared at the cupboard. One door hung crooked. The same one his daughter used to slam when she was mad. He touched the edge of it, then pulled back. Downstairs creaked. He turned. The cellar door moved. Just a crack, like it had sighed. He stood still, then grabbed the lantern. The stairs groaned under him. Smelled like dirt and old apple skin. He hadn't been down there since last frost. The lamp flickered once, then steadied. He reached the bottom, walked past the jars, past the folded blankets, past the grain sacks slumped like sleeping dogs in the corner. Then he stopped. Something poked from under the far sack. A corner of paper, browned, warped. He dragged the sack back. Dust kicked up. It was a photo, curled at the edges, creased once down the middle like someone had folded it hard, then regretted it. His hand trembled. His daughter stood in the photo, backlit by the barn door. Same shoes, same dress, chin tilted like she didn't trust the person taking it. The same way the girl had looked at him by the pond. He staggered back, hold the photo tighter. He didn't take this picture. He climbed the stairs fast, hit the kitchen light with the back of his hand. The photo sat heavy on the table. He didn't look at it again. Just wait. The widow came home near midnight, boots muddy, scarf damp. He didn't speak when she entered, just held out the picture. She looked at it, eyes narrowing. Where'd you find that? Cellar. Why was it down there? He shook his head. I don't know. She stared longer. That's the day before. I know. Who took it? Not me. She swallowed, sat down. He watched her. Did you move it? No. You sure? She didn't look away. I buried it. His chest tightened. With her? She nodded once, tucked in her hands. He looked at the photo again. His daughter's eyes didn't blink. The shoes were clearer. Then he remembered. You saw the grave. I sealed the box. You saw the photo inside? I tucked it under her fingers. You watched me. He didn't speak. She picked up the glass, drank what he hadn't. Then, were you not telling me? There's a girl. Where? In the barn. What girl? He hesitated. She had the shoes. What shoes? Those shoes. The widow froze. That's not possible. I know. She stood. You buried them with her. She said they were a gift. The widow blinked. Who said that? The girl. What girl? I told you. You're not making sense. I'm telling you exactly what I saw. The widow backed up a step. You let her in the house? No. She came on her own? She walked into the pond wearing them. The widow stared, pale now. You call the sheriff? No. Why not? I don't know. She stepped past him. I want to see. He grabbed her wrist. Not tonight. Let go. She's not dangerous. You don't know that. She's just quiet. She has our daughter's shoes. I know. She has that look. He didn't answer. She has that same damn look, the widow whispered. He let go. She didn't go to the barn. Just sat on the couch, holding her arms tight across her chest. He sat across from her, the lamp humming above them both. Neither spoke for a long while. Then the widow said softly, You think it's her? He shook his head. No, but you didn't call the law. I didn't. You still think she's just a girl? He didn't answer. She stood again. I want to see the grave. Now. Yes. He grabbed the shovel. She grabbed the lantern. They walked out into the dark, past the shed, toward the row of stones. Her boots sank in the soft dirt. They stopped at the last one. No name, just a little iron cross she'd nailed in herself. He dug, slow, silent. The widow held the light. He hit wood. She crouched down. Open it. He did. The lid creaked. Dry. Hollow. The box was empty. No dress. No shoes. No photo. Just a scrap of soil. And something carved into the inside of the lid. He held the light closer. For letters. G-I-F-T. He dropped the lantern. It rolled once, flickered, held. The widow stepped back. Hand over her mouth. He didn't speak. Couldn't. Behind them, the barn creaked. Then the humming started again. Soft. Familiar. The tune they used to sing before bed. The widow turned slow. She remembers, she said. He looked back at the grave. Then toward the barn. She clutched his arm. We never told her that song. His voice cracked. We didn't have to. She was still in the barn when morning cracked. Hay stuck to her knees. Eyes wide open, like she hadn't slept, like she didn't need to. He unbarred the door, stepped inside. She didn't flinch, just watched him, calm as ever. You sleep? He asked. She shook her head. Are you hungry? She nodded once. He passed her bread and a jar of water. She drank slowly, chewed slower. He crouched in front of her, elbows on his knees, studied her face. Do you remember anything yet? She wiped her mouth. Some things. Like what? She tapped the toe of the shoe. She said I'd feel it. The name. He stared. What name? The girl looked straight at him. Voice low. Clara. His heart stopped. The name punched through his chest. He stood. Quick. Too fast. Backed away from her like she'd bitten him. He didn't say it. Hadn't spoken her name in almost a year. You said what? She blinked. Clara, how do you know that? She told me. He grabbed her arm hard. Told you when. She just does. At night. He let go. Backed away. Hands shaking. That's not your name. She nodded. I know. So, why are you saying it? She said it was hers. He stepped outside without another word. Slammed the door behind him. Didn't bar it this time. The widow stood on the porch. Pale. Holding her coat, closed at the neck like she couldn't get warm. You talked to her? He didn't answer. She speaks. He nodded. What did she say? She knows her name. The widow's eyes narrowed. Whose name? He didn't want to say it again. Whose name, damn it? Clara. The widow froze. One hand gripped the rail. No one told her, he said. I didn't either. She could have heard. No one says her name. She looked past him toward the barn. She's playing games. He shook his head. She's quiet. Don't ask her much. That doesn't mean she's safe. He didn't reply. Later, the widow cooked. She usually doesn't. Just cracked eggs, bread in the pan. Didn't speak while she did it. He watched the smoke curl out the stovepipe. Thought about that name, said by a stranger's mouth. When the girl came to the door, She didn't knock, just stood there. The widow opened it slowly. The girl said nothing, just hummed. The widow's hand gripped the doorframe. "You stop that." The humming paused. The girl looked past her, in the hallway, toward the back room. The widow stepped in front. "You have no reason to be looking there." "She used to keep her drawings on the wall," the girl said. The widow slammed the door shut. "She's lying," she said, breath caught. "She knew the room," he said. "She could have seen." "From where?" The widow didn't answer. The girl sat on the porch, waiting, swinging her feet slowly like she wasn't sitting on anything real. He brought her the plate, sat next to her. "Do you know any more names?" She shook her head. "You remember where you're from?" "No." "Your parents?" "No." "You remember dying?" She didn't blink. She said, "I didn't die. I just changed." He swallowed hard. "Change how?" She said, "The shoes carried me." He looked down. The buckles shone in the light. Still no mud on them. No fray on the laces. "You know what happened to her?" She said, "You forgot the promise." He stiffened. "What promise?" She said, "You'd know." He stood and walked back inside. Didn't touch his plate. Didn't speak. The widow sat at the kitchen table, elbows tight, one hand fidgeting with a napkin. "She knows more than she says," she whispered. He didn't look at her. "She's watching me, like she remembers." She said the name. She said it like it was hers. He stared out the window. The girl is still swinging her feet. Same slow rhythm. "You think she's lying?" The widow's voice cracked. "If she's not, then where's Clara?" He didn't answer. That night, she watched the girl from the upstairs window, arms folded, shaking even though the house was warm. Downstairs, he sat by the hearth, not reading, not drinking. The girl sat by the coals, humming again, just soft. He finally spoke. "Where'd you hear that song?" She looked up. She used to sing to the birds. He stared at her. "What birds?" "The ones that got stuck in the barn rafters." He didn't move. "That detail is too exact." "She'd stand on the crate," the girl added. "Use the broom to help em down." His hand clenched around the armrest. "Sometimes they come back after," the girl said. "Sometimes they didn't." The fire crackled once. She said, "You stopped listening to them, too." He got up, left the room. Upstairs, the widow turned from the window. She said again, "I know." She asked about the drawings. "I know. I burned those." He froze. "What?" "The night after. I couldn't look at them." He nodded once. She never drew birds again. The widow sat down on the bed. "She knows." He turned the lamp low. "I think she remembers everything." They didn't sleep. In the barn the next morning, the girl had drawn a bird in the dirt with her finger. Same one Clara used to draw. The wing was crooked, beak too wide. He stared at it, breath caught in his chest. The girl looked up. She said, "I'd need to teach you." "Teach me what?" "How to say her name again." He looked at her, voice rough. "Clara." The girl smiled. "There you go." The girl sat at the table like she belonged there, legs swinging slow, same quiet humming in her throat. The plate in front of her was clean. She hadn't asked for seconds, but she hadn't hesitated either. Just ate like she'd done it before. The widow barely touched her food. He chewed slowly, eyes flicking between them, between fork and firelight and the girl's mouth. Then the widow froze, fork halfway up. "What is that?" The girl stopped chewing. I looked down. The widow's chair scraped back. She reached across the table fast, grabbed the spoon from the girl's hand. The girl didn't flinch. He looked at the spoon, too. I didn't recognize it at first. Then he did. Curved edge, tiny chip at the handle, silver worn thin. It was Clara's. It had been missing since the burial. The widow turned it in her palm. "You said you didn't take it," she said to him. "I didn't." She ran her finger along the inside of the handle, then stopped. "There's dirt." "What?" "Right here," she whispered. "Packed in." He leaned in. I saw it, dark streak down the crease of the handle. "Fresh." "Look at it." The girl watched them both. Calm. She gave it to me? The widow snapped toward her. No, she didn't. She said you'd be mad. You don't talk about her. She told me not to hide it. The widow stepped back from the table, hand shaking. He looked at the spoon again. You dig her up? No, the girl said. Then how'd you get it? She said it was mine now. That was her favorite spoon. The widow snapped. She knows. I buried it with her. He blinked. You did. In her pocket, sewn in. The room went still. Why? He asked. So she'd never eat alone again. He swallowed hard. She was cold, the widow whispered. I didn't want her to feel hungry. I didn't want her to feel forgotten. The girl stood up, held her hands behind her back. She's not cold now. Stop saying things you don't understand, the widow barked. She said you'd say that. The widow dropped the spoon. It clanged on the wood floor. I want to see the grave, she said. We saw it already, he muttered. I want to see it again. He didn't argue. They left the girl at the table. She didn't follow. The widow carried the lantern, same one they used before. Its light flickered, shaking in her hand. They crossed the field, stepped over the same fence, moved past the dead weeds and lean stone markers. The dirt over Clara's grave looked undisturbed. No paw prints, no holes. Still, the widow dropped to her knees, started scraping with her hands. He watched her for a second, then grabbed the shovel from the shed. She didn't stop him. He dug, fast, not careful, threw dirt in all directions. When the wood hit, they both paused. He wiped his hands on his coat, gripped the lid, pulled. The coffin groaned open. The lantern dipped low. Empty. No dress. No hair. No bones. No spoon. The widow fell back, mud on her knees, eyes wide. No, she's not there, he said. She was. I know. I sealed it. I watched you lower it. I did. She started crying, but didn't make a sound. Just rocked back, hand pressed to her chest like it hurt to breathe. She's gone, she whispered. He nodded. No shovel marks, she said. No break in the dirt. No. He looked at the coffin again. Inside, something scratched along the wood grain, etched faintly and crooked. Letters. He leaned closer. I told you not to forget. He turned the lantern toward her. She left a message. The widow didn't move. You need to see this. No. He stood. She said it, he muttered. She said it was hers now. The widow looked back toward the house. That girl, she said. She's not Clara. He looked at her. But she knows things. She's not Clara. He didn't argue. They walked back in silence. One lantern. No words. Inside, the girl was still standing by the table. Fire low. You dug it up, she said. Neither answered. The girl picked up the spoon from the floor. Hold it out. Do you want it back? The widow stared at it, shook her head. No, she said. It's yours now. The girl tucked it into her pocket. She said you'd say that too. He leaned on the doorframe, staring at the girl. You're not her. The girl nodded. I know, but you remember. Yes. How? She gave me what she couldn't keep. He rubbed his face. And what's that? The girl turned toward the fire. You. No one spoke after that. The widow sat in the corner, eyes on the hearth. He poured a drink, but didn't swallow it. The girl took Clara's old blanket from the shelf, wrapped herself in it. Then she began to hum again, and the wind outside fell quiet. He didn't want to make the call, didn't want the badge near the house. But the widow held the phone like it was a match and said, If we don't, someone else will. The sheriff came just before dusk. Same truck, same boots from last year. Dust never left them. He stepped out slowly, looked around like nothing had changed, tipped his hat at the widow, nodded once at the man. You still drink the cheap stuff? The sheriff asked. The man didn't answer. The sheriff looked toward the barn, then the field. Which grave? The widow didn't speak. I just started walking. They followed. The dirt was still open. Casket lid laid bare like an open mouth. The sheriff leaned over it, hands on his hips, one boot tapping slow. He squinted at the bottom. Empty, huh? Wasn't, the widow said. Now it is. She was in there the whole time. Now she's gone. The sheriff spit in the grass. You dig it up? He nodded. We did. No signs of tampering? No. No tracks? No. The sheriff scratched his chin. Happens more than folks like to admit. The widow's voice cracked. Are you saying this is normal? I'm saying graves don't always stay put round here. She stared hard. That's not an answer. It's the one I got. You gonna file a report? He laughed once. Quiet. Ain't no law against ghosts, ma'am. She stepped closer. And if someone took her, then they didn't leave tracks. The man's voice was tight. Are you saying we imagined this? I'm saying you might not want what comes with proving it. Silence held. The sheriff looked down into the empty box again. You bury anything else with her? The widow didn't speak. She had a spoon. The man said, Gone too. That's all. The girl's shoes, he added. She's wearing them. The sheriff raised a brow. The girl? He nodded. The sheriff chewed on that for a moment. Where's she now? Inside. She says how she got him? Clara gave him to her. The sheriff chuckled again. They always say that. The widow stepped in. You've heard this before? Not this exact tale, but versions. Versions? He looked up from the grave. We bury the dead. Sure, but not everything stays where you put it. The wind picked up. Grass bent. The sheriff adjusted his hat. You want me to write it up? No, the man said. Yes, the widow snapped. The sheriff shrugged. I can file a note, if that helps you sleep. She didn't answer. He walked back to his truck slowly. Left tire tracks where none had been. Inside, the girl sat by the hearth. Barefoot now, shoes in her lap, a cloth in one hand. Small circuit of motions on the leather. The sheriff stepped inside, boots loud. She looked up, didn't speak. He tipped his hat. Evening. She nodded once. Those yours? She looked at the shoes. They are now. He crouched down in front of her. Where'd you get 'em? She wiped one clean. She gave them. Who? Clara. The sheriff studied her face. Her name? The girl nodded. He stood. I looked at the man. You sure you don't want this on record? He didn't reply. The widow crossed her arms. You're dismissing it. No, ma'am, the sheriff said. I'm respecting it. He looked back at the girl. Are you staying here now? She said I should. Why? She said he forgot. The sheriff raised a brow. Forgot what? The promise. The man tensed. The sheriff turned to him. What promise? He didn't answer. The girl went back to polishing. The widow spoke up. You're really not going to do anything? He shrugged. Can't charge a ghost. She's not a ghost. Then what is she? No one answered. The sheriff sighed. You want advice? No, the man said. Doesn't matter, the sheriff replied. You should sleep with the door bolted. Not 'cause she's dangerous, but 'cause forgetting comes with a price. He left without shaking hands. They watched his truck fade down the dirt road. Inside, the girl still hummed, shoes in hand. The polished rag, now folded neat across her lap. The widow stood in the corner, arms wrapped tight around herself. You forgot something, the girl said without looking up. He stepped closer. What? You promised her. The widow turned. He stiffened. I never. You did. He knelt. What'd I promise? She said you pretend not to know. He looked down. The widow spoke, voice brittle. When Clara was 6, she asked if we'd stay here forever. He remembered the oak swing, the creak behind the fence, her dirty knees. You told her yes, the widow whispered. I meant it, but you left. I came back. She said it didn't count. He turned to the girl. You remember that? She remembers. He sat back against the hearth. A firelight caught the edge of the spoon tucked in her pocket. You think this ends with her staying? The girl looked at him. She said it ends when you remember everything. And if I don't? The girl smiled faintly. Then it starts over. The fire cracked once. She picked up the shoes and placed them side by side, toes pointed out. Then she reached for the polish again. Soft circles. Nothing else was said. The girl wouldn't sleep. Not that night. Not with the fire low and the air tight like something waiting to break. She walked the house slowly, barefoot on wood, the shoes placed neat by the hearth. Not once did they gather dust. Not once did they shift. He sat at the kitchen table, jaw clenched, glass untouched. The widow watched the girl from the stairs, silent, wrapped in her old shawl, fingers white around the rail. The girl whispered to herself, half singing, "You need to stop that," the man said. She didn't. He stood. "I mean it." The girl turned. "You're shaking." I said stop. She tilted her head. "You remember what you did?" His voice cracked. "Don't play with me." She didn't want to tell. "Tell what?" She said she forgave you. The widow stepped down one stair. "Forgive him for what?" The girl didn't answer, just walked toward the back door. "Where are you going?" the widow asked. She said to show you. He grabbed the door before she could open it. "No one's going out." "She's waiting." "No one's out there." The girl pointed. "The barn." He stood still. Her finger didn't move. She remembers. The widow's voice was thin. "What happened in the barn?" The girl whispered. He broke it. He swallowed hard. "You don't know what you're saying." She said it hurt, but not the way he thought. The widow's hand dropped. He looked at her, eyes wide. "You don't believe this." The girl looked at the widow. "She told me not to be scared of you." "Enough," he snapped. "You're not her." She said I'd have to remind you. "I didn't do anything." She said you begged her not to tell. He slammed his hand on the wall. "Stop." The sound echoed. The girl didn't blink. She said it started with a promise. "Stop." She said you said sorry after. The widow stepped off the stairs. The girl turned to her. "You remember that night, when she wouldn't come down for supper?" "I thought she was sick," the widow whispered. "She wasn't." The man backed away. "This is twisted." She said the rope was too tight around the hay bale. He closed his eyes. "No." She said you said it was a game. "No." She said you cried after. The widow stared at him. "Is it true?" He shook his head. "She's lying." "She knows." "I never touched her." "She remembers." The girl stepped out the door. He didn't stop her this time. She walked barefoot across the mud, her feet sunk deep, but the shoes stayed clean by the fire. The widow followed. He stayed behind, breathing hard, staring at the place where the girl's finger had pointed. The barn stood open. The girl walked inside like she'd never left. She reached the far stall, the one they never use anymore, the one with the rope hook on the beam. She said it happened here. The widow stood in the doorway, couldn't step forward. "She told me," he said, "it would make her brave." "No," the widow breathed. "Please." She said he cried when he saw the mark. The widow knelt. "That's why she wore high collars." She said you noticed, but you didn't ask. Tears at the dirt. The girl watched them fall. She said you looked away. Same as now. The wind moved through the rafters. The old swing creaked once. Back at the house, the man poured another drink. Didn't touch it. He looked at the shoes. Still polished. Still shining. He picked them up, carried them outside. The wind stopped. The barn door stood open. He walked slowly, shoes in hand. The girl turned. She doesn't want them now. He held them up. She can take them. She gave them away. The widow didn't look at him. She's not coming back. She doesn't have to, the girl said. He set the shoes down. They're hers. The girl didn't move. He dropped to his knees. Voice low. It was once. No, the girl whispered. It was more. The widow stepped back. I didn't know. She says, you did. He covered his face. She says it's not about punishment. It's about remembering. The air turned cold. The girl knelt, dug her hand into the dirt, pulled up a ribbon, pale blue, frayed. She said, you buried it here. He stared. I forgot about that. She didn't. The widow took the ribbon, held it like it still belonged to someone. I used to brush her hair with that, she said. She says you stopped after. They didn't speak for a long time. Then the girl said, she forgives you. The man looked up. Why? She loved you. The girl stood, stepped past him, didn't take the shoes. She just didn't want to carry it alone anymore. She left the barn. Wind picked up again, dry and low. Inside the house, the fire flickered. The shoes sat by the door now, caked in mud, still clean. The fire burned low, not enough to warm, just enough to cast shadows that moved like memories. The man hadn't spoken in hours, sat with his head down, fingers wrapped around a cold glass. The girl rocked slowly in Clara's chair, humming that half song, half sigh. The widow stood at the hearth, stirring the coals. The poker scraped metal, hit something hard. She paused. Ash tumbled forward, soft and gray. Then something black dropped from the flue, landed with a soft thud in the grate. The girl stopped humming. The widow leaned down, brushed ash away. Her fingers found corners. Folded paper, burned at the edges. She pulled it out with shaking hands. It was a letter, sealed with a scrap of twine. The man looked up. What is it? She didn't answer. The girl whispered. She said, you find it. The widow stared at the soot-stained envelope. Her name was written across the front. Clara's hand. Not a guess. Not close. Exactly right. Where'd this come from? The man asked. The widow didn't speak. Tore the twine. Unfolded the paper. Her eyes moved fast, then slow. Then they stopped. What is it? He asked again. She read aloud, voice flat. Fragile. Mama, I don't want to write this. But if you find it, I guess it means I didn't get to say it out loud. I know you see it. I know you hear it. He didn't mean to, but he won't stop until someone does. The words hung in the room like smoke that wouldn't lift. The man stood, voice sharp. What the hell is that? The widow lowered the letter. It's hers. No, it ain't. She signed it. Someone faked it. She dated it. She held the paper out. He snatched it, scanned the page. His hands trembled. The girl sat still now, watching him. The widow stepped back. You remember her writing that? No. You remember what you did? His voice rose. I didn't touch her like that. The widow's eyes burned. But you touched her. He looked down. You made her afraid. I didn't mean. But you did. Silence stretched then. The girl whispered. She told me the smoke would carry it. The widow stared at her. What? She said she hid it behind the bricks. The man gripped the edge of the table. That chimney's been cleaned a dozen times. She said you never look high enough. The widow turned to the fire again. Why now? The girl shrugged. She said it had to wait until you were ready. I was never ready. She knows. The man dropped into the chair, letter still in hand. This doesn't prove anything. She wrote it, the widow said. Maybe it's old. It's dated. She could have written it for something else. She didn't. The girl's voice was quiet. She thought if she said out loud, you'd stop loving her. He looked at the girl, eyes wide. She said that. She told me. He set the letter down like it might burn him. The widow picked it back up. I folded it, tucked it into her coat. Where you going? He asked. She deserves a marker. He stood. We already buried. No, the widow said. We covered it up. He took a step toward her. You really believe all this? The widow stared hard. I always did. I just didn't want to. The girl got up from the chair. I walked to the hearth. Her fingers brushed the bricks near the flue. She said there were more. More what? The widow asked. Words. The girl pressed one brick. It sank slightly. Ash fell again. Another folded slip slid down into her hands. The man staggered back. No, no, that's not possible. The widow took the new paper, opened it slowly. Another note. Short. Mama, if I leave, don't let him call an accident. It wasn't. Not the way you think. Not the first time. Not the last. She folded it tight. I knew, she whispered. I knew. He dropped into the chair again. Couldn't speak. Couldn't move. The widow turned to the girl. How many more? She doesn't know. She hid them fast. The widow looked at the man. She was scared of you. He didn't argue. The girl walked back to the shoes, sat down. I began cleaning them again. She said when it's clean, it can be remembered right. The widow wiped her hands, face streaked with soot. She wanted us to see it, she said. She wanted to rest, the girl replied. The man sat still, a letter still on the table, head bowed. The fire hissed. And this time, when the girl hummed, the widow didn't tell her to stop. He didn't sleep that night. The wind was too quiet. The house was still too. He could feel the weight of it, something pressing down that he couldn't shake. The fire had long gone out, and the whiskey sat untouched on the table. The barn door creaked on its hinges. He had to do something. The widow was asleep, but he wasn't. At midnight, he slipped outside, grabbed a shovel, and moved toward the barn. His boots crunched over the frost, the cold biting at his neck. He stopped once he reached the back of the barn, where the dirt was soft. The moon was high. He could see the shadow of the barn against the grass, stretching long and thin. He didn't know why he was doing it, didn't know what he thought he'd find. He just knew that she had said it. She said, I left something there. The words from the girl echoed in his mind. She didn't say much, but it was enough. Enough for him to feel the tug of something buried. He set the shovel into the dirt, hitting it hard against the cold earth. A crack would splintered. He didn't stop. He kept going, faster, like he was running from the sound of his own breath. The shovel hit something solid. Metal. His heart slammed in his chest. He dropped to his knees, pushing the dirt away with his hands. Cold earth crumbled, spilling from his palms. Then he saw it, half buried, twisted at the edges, a metal box, rusted and dented. He didn't hesitate. He pried it open with his hands, dirt still clinging to his fingers. The lid creaked. Inside, the shoes were stacked on top of something, smaller than his daughter's, older. He reached inside, the shoes fitting snug in his hands. No scuff marks, no damage. And underneath them, bones. His breath caught. His knees buckled. He dropped the box, but didn't let go of the shoes. They were in his hands, even as his heart turned cold. The bones were too small, too delicate, fragile in the moonlight. He stared at them, throat tight, mind racing. He wasn't ready for this. He couldn't have been. He choked. His chest ached as he sank to the dirt, the box beside him. The widow's voice cut through the night air. What are you doing? He turned, eyes wide. She stood at the door of the barn, lantern in hand, face pale under the light. What did you find? His hands were shaking. He couldn't speak. She stepped closer, her shoes crunching the dirt. She looked down at the shoes first, then to the bones. Her face went white. Where did you? She stopped herself, eyes tearing. She crouched down next to him, hand trembling as she touched the shoes. I didn't know, he whispered. I didn't know. Where did you find them? He couldn't answer. He could barely breathe. He stared at the bones, small, like they belonged to someone who had never even had a chance to grow. She said I left something there. He managed to say, voice shaking. The widow leaned forward, eyes too wide, her hand trembling as she touched the box. She said, she told me to dig here. Her breath caught. She looked at him with something between disbelief and horror. She told you? He nodded. She said there was something here. She said I left it behind. The widow's hand hovered over the box, but she didn't touch it. She looked away, hand over her mouth, tears welling up in her eyes. The man pulled the shoes close to his chest. The tears fell fast now, but they were quiet. No words, just the sound of the dirt, the cold, the night. He couldn't finish. She was so small. She couldn't have. The widow's voice was barely a whisper. No, it couldn't have been. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't an accident. The widow closed her eyes, shaking her head. No, no. His chest heaved with the weight of it. He reached for the bones again, his hands trembling. He hadn't meant for this. Hadn't meant for any of it. He gripped the shoes tight in his hands. The widow stood up, wiping her eyes. She turned away, not looking at him anymore. Did you know? He asked. His voice cracked. She didn't answer. He dropped the shoes to the ground. Did you know? She turned back to him, eyes filled with pain. I didn't want to know. I didn't want any of this. The air between them felt thick. The moonlight was too sharp. You promised her, the widow whispered, voice breaking. I didn't mean, he started, but the words stopped there. You promised you'd stop, she said again, her voice cold now. But you didn't. The silence stretched long. He couldn't meet her eyes, couldn't look at the shoes. The widow turned away again. I want to bury them. I'm sorry, he said, barely audible. I'm sorry. She walked past him without another word, back to the house. He stayed there, staring at the shoes, the bones. The dirt beneath his nails felt heavy, like a weight he couldn't shake, and all he could hear was the wind and the echo of the girl's words. He won't stop until someone does. Then finally he buried it. The girl sat by the hearth, the same shoes in her lap. Her feet were bare, but the shoes stayed clean, even as the dirt from the floor clung to her legs. The fire flickered in the dark. The widow stood at the kitchen counter, hands trembling as she washed dishes, but her eyes stayed on the girl. The man sat at the table, staring into his empty glass. The hum was quiet at first, faint, but it grew louder as the minutes passed. A soft melody, so familiar, so wrong. He hadn't heard it since Clara was alive. But now, it was here again, like a ghost haunting the room. The girl's voice was thin and eerie, barely audible over crackling fire. She gave me the shoes when I was on the floor. The widow froze, the dish still in her hand. She turned slowly. What did you say? The girl didn't look up. She kept humming, her eyes distant, like she was hearing something no one else could. She gave me the shoes when I was on the floor. The man looked at the widow. Her face had gone pale. Under the floor? The girl nodded slowly. She said I had to walk home. The widow's voice broke. How long were you down there? The girl didn't answer. Her fingers traced the shoes, the same ones Clara used to wear. She told me I had to wait until the door was open. The widow's hand shook as she set the dish aside. She stepped toward the girl. How long? How long were you under there? The girl didn't look up. She didn't stop humming. A long time. The room fell silent except for the hum, the sound of the floorboards creaking in the old house. The air felt thick, pressing in around them. The man finally stood, walked across the room, and stood next to the widow. His voice was tight. What does that mean? Under the floor? The girl looked at him then, her eyes wide but calm. She said she'd come back for me when the floorboards were gone. The widow took a step back. What floorboards? The girl's gaze shifted to the corner of the room, to where the floor met the wall, the one she pulled up. The man's chest tightened. When? The girl's humming stopped for a moment, but only for a beat. The night she went away. The widow flinched. The night she died. The girl didn't respond. For a moment, no one moved. The fire popped. Ashes drifted up the chimney. Finally, the man spoke. His voice was strained. You're saying Clara was on the floor? The girl didn't answer. She stood up, slowly, as if she was moving through a dream. Her bare feet made no sound on the wooden floor. She walked toward the hearth, set the shoes down next to the fire. The widow watched her. Why didn't you tell us before? I didn't know I was supposed to. The man stepped forward, his fists clenched. You knew what happened? The girl didn't flinch. She told me it was a secret. She said no one was supposed to know. He reached for her arm, but she pulled away, her eyes wide. You can't touch me. His breath caught. You're not Clara. No, she whispered. I'm not, but I remember. The widow stepped back again. She pressed her hand to her mouth. The man didn't know what to say. He looked at the girl again, his heart pounding in his chest. You said you were on the floor. The girl nodded. I was, when the door was locked. The widow looked at the man, then back at the girl. And when you came out, I walked home, the girl said, almost absently. She said it would take time. The widow's voice was small, broken. She said you had to walk home? She gave me the shoes, the girl said quietly, almost to herself. She said I had to walk home. The silence was suffocating now. The man didn't know where to go, what to do. It felt like they were unraveling, piece by piece. The widow spoke, her voice low, as though she was afraid to speak louder. But why didn't you come to us? The girl blinked. Her expression was vacant, unreadable. I didn't know I could. The man's chest felt tight, like he couldn't breathe. Why the shoes? The girl shrugged, her hands twisting in her lap. She said they were the only thing that could keep me from getting lost. The widow sank into the chair behind her. She told you to wear them? Even after? Yes, the girl said, cutting her off. She said they would guide me. The fire crackled again. The girl stood up and turned toward the door. She said I had to wait until you saw. The widow's voice shook. Saw what? The girl paused just before the door. The truth. The door creaked open. She stepped out onto the porch. The man stood still, his heart racing. Where are you going? She didn't answer. She just walked outside. The widow stood, too, but didn't follow. The man glanced at the fire, the shoes by the hearth. His hands trembled. He couldn't breathe. He turned to the widow. What do we do now? She didn't look at him. She stared at the shoes. We don't do anything. The man's breath caught. But she's here. She's telling us. She said she would. The widow whispered. And she said it would hurt. That's why we're not supposed to remember. But we do. We always do. The wind outside shifted. The floorboards creaked again, louder now. The girl's humming rose once more. And somewhere deep in the house, the walls seemed to hold their breath. The fire roared in the hearth. The room was thick with heat. The smell of burning was filling the air. The widow's hand shook as she reached for the shoes, still perfectly clean, the leather smooth and unmarred despite the dust of the barn. The girl had placed them on the hearth with a steady hand, looking at them like they held some unspoken truth. The man stood back, eyes narrowed. The widow hesitated, but then placed the shoes in the center of the flames. The fire hissed and crackled as the flames reached high, twisting in bright orange and red, but the shoes didn't blacken. They didn't catch at all. It was as if the fire knew better than to touch them. The girl stood just to the side, watching the flames with quiet, unwavering eyes. Her voice was soft but clear, cutting through the roar of the fire. You can't burn what's still owed. The widow's chest tightened, and for a moment, she felt like she couldn't breathe. The fire flickered wildly, but the shoes were untouched. Not a single mark, not a charred edge. She stepped back, eyes fixed on the still pristine shoes and the flames. She turned to the man. What does that mean? He didn't answer. He just stood there, watching the shoes, his hands clenching and unclenching at his sides. His voice was hoarse. It means she's not done. The air in the room felt heavy, suffocating almost. Time seemed to stretch, holding its breath along with the widow, the man, and the girl. The fire continued to burn high, but the shoes were untouched, as if some invisible hand were holding them safe. Then the door creaked. The widow turned, her heart leaping into her throat. The sheriff stood in the doorway, his shadow stretching across the floor. His hand was tight around the handle of his pistol, the metal gleaming in the dim light. I thought you'd come, the widow said, her voice steady but tight with a nervous edge. What do you want now? The sheriff didn't move. He stood still, eyes locked on the shoes. His jaw tightened, a flicker of something dark passing over his face. I came to finish what I started. The girl didn't flinch at his words. She didn't even look at him. Her gaze was fixed on the shoes and the flames. You can't finish what was never yours to end. The sheriff's eyes snapped to her, and for the first time, a flash of something like recognition passed between them. He stepped inside, boots heavy on the floor. She's not the first. She won't be the last. The widow stiffened, her hand clutching the edge of the table. The man's face darkened. What the hell does that mean? The sheriff's hand rested on the handle of his pistol. He didn't take his eyes off the girl. It means I'm not the only one she's been waiting for. The widow looked at the sheriff, her mouth dry. Who else? Who else have you been keeping this secret from? The sheriff's lip curled in a grim smile, but there was no joy in it. No one's innocent in this town. Not anymore. The widow's pulse quickened. She turned to the girl, her voice shaking. What does he mean by that? What's he talking about? The girl still didn't move. She didn't even look at the sheriff. He knows. He always knew. The sheriff stepped closer, his boots thudding softly against the wooden floor. I should have put a stop to it the moment I saw her. But I didn't, and now it's too late. The widow's hand shook as she reached into the hearth, grabbing the old badge that had fallen from the sheriff's coat, buried in the ashes. The metal was hot, but it didn't burn her fingers. The sheriff's eyes locked on the badge, a flicker of unease passing over his face. You don't get to walk away from this, the widow said, her voice low but strong. He stepped back, his hand hovering over his pistol. It's not over yet. The girl stood up slowly, her voice a mere whisper, but cutting through the thick tension in the room. You didn't finish it. You didn't finish what you started. The sheriff's grip tightened around the pistol, but his eyes flicked from the girl to the widow and back again. His chest rose and fell, his breath quickening. You don't understand, the widow said, eyes locked on him. You never did. The man stepped forward, voice tight with emotion. You let this happen. You could have stopped it, and you didn't. The sheriff's face twisted in something between guilt and anger. He didn't respond. The widow lifted the badge higher, her hand steady now. This is yours, isn't it? Your symbol of control. Your claim over the lives you couldn't save. The sheriff's eyes narrowed. You think you can burn me with a damn badge? The widow's voice was steady now. I think you'll burn yourself with it. The sheriff didn't flinch, but there was something more in his eyes now. Something broken. I didn't have a choice, he muttered. You always had a choice, the widow said, voice cold as the night outside. You just never took it. The sheriff backed away, his pistol still drawn, but no longer aimed at anyone. His shoulders sagged, and his gaze fell to the floor. I didn't mean to let her die, he whispered, more to himself than to anyone else. I didn't mean it. The room was silent for a long time after that. The fire still crackled, but the shoes were gone. The widow didn't take her eyes off the sheriff. Then it's time to face the truth. The sheriff didn't answer. He didn't move. The girl was still standing by the hearth. Her shoes were gone, as though they'd never been there to begin with. The only thing left was a crackling fire and the weight of a promise that had finally caught up with them all. Dawn broke slow, the sky barely a shade of gray, and the air thick with a cold that seemed to reach through the bones. The pond sat still, its surface a sheet of glass reflecting the sky's reluctant light. The girl stood by the edge, her bare feet skimming the water. She was dressed in the same old dress, the one that had faded with time, but still held the ghost of her daughter's warmth. She hummed again, the same tune that clung to the walls of the house, the same melody that wouldn't leave. She's underneath, the girl said, her voice soft, her eyes empty. Waiting. The man stood still behind her, watching her every move, his body tense, his hands clenched by his sides. Stop this, he whispered, voice hoarse. You don't have to do this. She didn't turn, just stare at the water, eyes glazed, the humming quieter now, as if it was a part of her, something she couldn't leave behind. She's waiting, the girl repeated. The man stumbled forward, desperate. I said stop. You don't know what you're doing. But she didn't respond. The water lapped at her ankles, cold and still, as if it were breathing with her. She said you'd come, the girl whispered again, barely a sound. She said you'd remember. The man's breath caught in his throat. His legs felt weak. He tried to steady himself, tried to ignore the gnawing dread that clawed at his chest. His feet sank deeper into the mud as he moved toward her, the air thick with the scent of something wet and old. Please, he begged, reaching out. Please don't go back in there. The girl's humming grew louder, swelling with the weight of something ancient. She turned her head just enough to catch his gaze, her face pale, her eyes wide. "She's waiting," she said. "You'd remember." The words burned through him like fire, sharp and cold all at once. The man didn't wait. He moved faster now, too fast, too reckless. He reached for her arm, his fingers grazing her wrist. Before he could pull her away, the water boiled. A low hiss echoed from the depths, a rumble beneath the surface, as if the pond itself were alive, pulling at them both. The water rose, churning in violent spirals, twisting like something alive. His fingers slid off her arm, and he stumbled back, tripping in the muck, his heart hammering. "No!" he screamed, but the pond answered with a gurgling hiss, a sound that twisted through the air like a scream too far away to reach. The girl didn't flinch. She didn't even move. The man fell to his knees, shaking. The water surged again, rising up like a wall, and the girl stepped deeper, her dress billowing around her like a ghost shroud. He screamed, his voice hoarse, raw. "You can't do this." But she didn't answer. She kept walking, the water rising with each step, her feet sinking into the cold, dark depths. Without thinking, he lunged forward, arms flailing as he splashed into the water after her. "No, I can't. I won't lose you again." The pond churned violently. His feet slipped in the mud. He plunged deeper, the cold seeping through him, his skin burning with the icy touch of the water. He screamed again, louder this time, desperation clawing at his chest. "Clara!" The water boiled around him, and for a moment it felt like it was pulling him under. His body froze with terror. But he reached out anyway, his fingers brushing against the girl's pale, still form. "Clara, please." But the girl wasn't Clara. She couldn't be. His hand closed around her wrist, and he yanked her back, but the water seemed to push him away, the pond fighting him like it was alive, refusing to let go. Then everything stopped. The water stilled. The girl stood there, looking at him. Her face was calm, empty. She looked at him like he wasn't there at all. He gasped for air, his lungs burning as he tried to push through the water, his arms shaking with the effort. "You don't understand. I never meant to." The ground beneath his feet shifted, and he was falling. He didn't see the water swallow him. He didn't see the blackness that rose beneath him like a darkened tide. But he could hear it, a terrible, hollow sound that echoed in his ears. The widow's voice cut through the air, sharp like a blade. "You said you'd stop." He turned, gasping, but all he could see was her standing on the bank, the badge clutched in her hand, gleaming dark in the fading light. "You promised her," the widow said, her voice trembling with rage and grief. "But you never did." The man's chest tightened. His breath came in ragged gasps. "I didn't mean to." "You promised her," she repeated, her voice low and broken. "And now she's waiting. She's waiting for you to remember what you did." He turned back to the girl, his heart pounding in his chest. Her face was calm, empty. The water roared again, louder this time, and his legs gave way beneath him. The pond pulled at him, pulling him under, pulling him toward the depths. The widow's voice followed him down, her words sharp like a curse. "You never stopped, and now it's too late." And the water swallowed him whole. The pond closed around him, silent once again. And the girl's humming, soft and distant, was the only sound left in the dark. The pond was still. The water lay flat and quiet, its surface reflecting the pale light of the early morning, as if nothing had happened at all. No ripples, no disturbance, just calm, the silence. He was gone. The widow stepped out onto the porch, her feet cold against the wooden floor. The air was crisp, untouched, the remnants of the storm settling into the earth. She looked across the yard, where the pond once churned, now nothing but a memory, a hollow in the landscape. The girl was asleep, curled up on the porch swing. Her bare feet hung off the edge, the tips of her toes barely brushing the floor. Her face was calm, serene, as if nothing had ever happened, as if the events of the night before hadn't torn apart something fragile and irreplaceable. The widow sat beside her, slowly, as if the weight of the world still pressed down on her shoulders. The swing creaked under the soft rhythm of her rocking. She let the motion carry her, hands folded tightly in her lap. The shoes sat between them, still as ever, untouched by time. The leather gleamed faintly in the morning light. The heat of the fire hadn't burned them. The water hadn't muddied them. Not a speck of dirt or damage. She stared at them for a long time. Her heart ached with a quiet grief that she couldn't explain. "They're warm," she said softly, more to herself and the girl. Her voice was strained. The girl shifted slightly, her eyes fluttering open, but she didn't move. She blinked up at the widow, her face pale in the morning light, but calm. The widow nodded toward the shoes. "They're yours now." The girl sat up slowly, her body stiff as if she'd been holding still for too long. She looked at the shoes, her gaze lingering for a moment before she reached for them. She slid them on, her feet fitting into the soft leather, without a thought. It was like they had always been meant for her. "They fit better today," she said quietly, her voice barely a whisper, as if she were sharing something precious. The widow said nothing. She just rocked in silence beside the girl, letting the quiet fill the space between them. There was no anger now, no confusion, only the slow acceptance of things that could never be undone. The wind picked up a little, the branches of the trees swaying gently. The leaves rustled, but the sound didn't break the silence on the porch. The widow let her eyes wander to the horizon, where the sun was just beginning to rise, casting a pale golden light across the land. She didn't need to look at the girl to know she was wearing Clara's shoes, the ones that had once been filled with her small, playful feet, the ones that had been washed clean by the water, untouched by fire or mud. She didn't need to say anything. The shoes were hers now, and whatever had come before had to be let go. They were hers, the widow whispered, more to herself now, her voice breaking with the weight of years. She loved them. The girl didn't reply at first. She just stared out into the distance, her legs tucked up underneath her. Her hands rested lightly in her lap. "I know," she said quietly after a long while. "She told me." The widow closed her eyes, letting the words settle in the quiet space between them. She thought of all the times Clara had worn those shoes, the way she had walked with such certainty, so sure of the world around her. She thought of the days that had slipped away so fast, the ones she would never get back. She had tried to hold on to them. I tried to keep her safe, but it was never enough. "I didn't stop it," the widow whispered, her voice raw. The girl didn't look at her. She kept her eyes fixed on the horizon. "You couldn't." "I tried." "You did." The widow felt her breath catch. The girl's words were soft but firm, as if she were speaking truths that only time could reveal. "I tried," the widow repeated, her voice breaking. "But I didn't stop it." The girl's gaze softened, and she shifted on the swing, the wood creaking under her slight weight. She said, "You would remember." The widow closed her eyes again, her hands trembling in her lap. "I didn't know how." "You do now," the girl said simply. The widow didn't answer. She let her fingers curl around the arms of the chair, her grip tightening as she tried to steady her thoughts. It was too much to hold on to, too much to unravel. The world seemed too heavy to bear. The girl sat quietly beside her, the shoes snug on her feet, and the wind whispered around them, carrying with it the sounds of the land, the quiet rhythm of the morning. For a moment, everything was still. Then the girl spoke again, her voice almost a murmur. She said it was always yours, that you'd find your way back. The widow opened her eyes, but she didn't look at the girl. Her gaze drifted back to the shoes, to the way they sat so neatly, so perfectly between them. The weight of the past, the grief, the lost moments, they all seemed to settle around the shoes, around the girl who now wore them. The widow's throat tightened. She didn't have words. She didn't need them. The girl looked at the shoes again. She said you'd know when to stop looking, when to stop trying to fix it. The widow blinked, the truth cutting through her like a blade. "I've been looking for her, haven't I?" The girl nodded slowly, her face soft with understanding. "She's not lost anymore." For a long time, neither of them spoke. The world around them felt distant and close at once, like a dream that could never be touched. Finally, the widow stood. She walked to the edge of the porch and turned back to the girl. "I'll be inside." The girl didn't answer. She simply sat there, her legs stretched out before her, her feet still in Clara's shoes. The widow stepped inside, but she didn't close the door. She didn't need to.